I found the letter on a Tuesday. Not hidden. Not tucked away in some drawer I wasn't supposed to open. It was just there, on the kitchen counter, between the grocery list and her coffee mug. The envelope was old, worn at the edges, like it had been opened and refolded 1,000 times. I shouldn't have read it. But when you see your wife's name written in someone else's handwriting, when you see the date from 3 years into your marriage, you don't just walk away. The words were simple. Too simple. I'm still waiting. That was all it took to unravel 7 years. She came home that evening with her hair still damp from the rain, smiling like nothing had changed. But I had changed. I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. I asked her about the letter. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me with those eyes I used to think held galaxies, and she said the words that would hollow me out from the inside. He's back. Not we need to talk. Not I'm sorry. Not I love you. Just, he's back. And I realized, standing there in the kitchen we painted together, that I had never been her choice. I had been her placeholder. I met Claire on a Wednesday afternoon in a bookstore that smelled like old paper and rain. The kind of place where time moves slower, where the air feels thick with stories that have already been told, and you walk in thinking you'll just browse but end up staying for hours. It was one of those independent bookstores that shouldn't still exist in a world of online shopping and digital readers, but somehow it does, tucked between a coffee shop and a vintage record store on a street most people walk past without noticing. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just killing time before a meeting that got cancelled at the last minute. My client had called, apologetic, rescheduling for next week because of some emergency. I could have gone back to the office. Should have, probably. But it was a beautiful afternoon, and I was tired of sitting behind a desk, staring at blueprints until my eyes crossed. So I walked. And somehow, I ended up here. The bell above the door chimed when I entered. The owner, an elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan that looked older than me, glanced up from his newspaper and nodded. I nodded back and wandered toward the back of the store. That's where I saw her. She was standing in the classics section, reaching for a book on the top shelf, standing on her toes, her fingertips just brushing the spine of a worn copy of Wuthering Heights. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, a few strands falling around her face, catching the light from the window behind her. She wore a paint-stained sweater that looked like it had been through 100 washes, the kind of sweater you don't wear in public unless you've stopped caring what people think. And jeans with a small tear at the knee. Not the fashionable kind. The kind that happens naturally from wear. She looked like art. Not like someone trying to be artistic. Like art itself. Something you'd want to frame and put on a wall and stare at until you understood what it meant. I didn't think. I just walked over. She was still stretching, her whole body extended, and I could see the frustration on her face as the book stayed just out of reach. I was taller. I reached up and handed the book to her. She turned, and when our eyes met, I swear the whole world tilted. Her eyes were green. Not just green. The kind of green you see in forests after rain, deep and alive and impossible to look away from. They were the kind of eyes that made you forget what you were going to say. She smiled, and it was soft, like something you'd want to protect from the world. Like morning light through curtains. Like the first warm day after a long winter. "Thank you," she said, and her voice matched her smile. Gentle. Warm. The kind of voice you could listen to for hours and never get tired of. "No problem," I said, and I meant to walk away. I really did. I'd given her the book. My good deed for the day was done. I should have nodded, smiled, and left her alone. But then she looked down at the book in her hands and laughed. A real laugh. Not polite. Not forced. Real. "I've read this 5 times already," she said, running her fingers over the cover. "I don't know why I keep coming back to it. It's depressing. Everyone's terrible to each other. Nobody ends up happy." "Maybe because it's worth coming back to," I said. She looked up at me, curious now, tilting her head slightly. "Are you a romantic, or just good at saying the right thing?" "Maybe both," I said. She laughed again, and I felt something shift in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe ever. "I'm Claire," she said, extending her hand. "Daniel," I said, taking it. Her hand was small in mine. Warm. Covered in tiny flecks of paint she'd probably forgotten were there. We started talking. About books. About why we kept returning to stories that hurt us. About whether Heathcliff was actually romantic or just toxic. About why we love characters who make terrible decisions. I think it's because they feel real, Claire said. Real people make terrible decisions. Real people hurt each other. Real people love the wrong person. You think Heathcliff loved the wrong person? I think he loved the right person the wrong way, she said. An hour passed. Then two. We moved from the classic section to the small cafe corner in the back, sitting at a table with chipped edges and coffee that had gone cold because neither of us remembered to drink it. She told me she was an artist. A painter. That she saw the world in colors most people didn't have names for. I don't just see blue, she said, her hands moving as she talked, like she was painting the words in the air. I see cerulean, cobalt, periwinkle, midnight, navy, sapphire. Every shade tells a different story. Every shade has a different feeling. What feeling is blue? I asked. Depends on the blue, she said. Light blue is hope. Dark blue is longing. Blue-gray is regret. What about green? I asked. Green is growth. New beginnings. Second chances. Is that why your eyes are green? She blushed. Actually blushed. And I felt like I'd won something. I told her I was an architect. That I built things meant to last. So you create permanence, she said, leaning forward, genuinely interested. And I create feeling. Emotions. Moments. Things that change depending on who's looking at them. We're complete opposites. Maybe that's why it works, I said. Why what works? This, I said, gesturing between us. This conversation. This moment. She smiled at that. A real smile. The kind that reaches your eyes and stays there, warming everything around it. We talked about our childhoods. Our dreams. Our fears. She told me she grew up in a small town, that she'd always felt like she didn't belong, like she was meant for something bigger. I told her I grew up in the city, that I'd always felt overwhelmed by how big everything was, like I'd never find my place. Maybe we were looking in the wrong places, she said. The bookstore owner, the old man with the patient eyes and the ancient cardigan, finally came over and cleared his throat softly. I hate to interrupt, he said, smiling like he knew exactly what he was interrupting, but we're closing in 5 minutes. I looked at my watch. It was past 8. We'd been talking for over 4 hours. Claire looked surprised too, like she hadn't realized how much time had passed, like the whole world had disappeared and it had just been us, floating in our own bubble. We walked outside together, into the evening air that smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet but would soon. The street was quiet. The coffee shop next door was closing. A few people walked past, talking, laughing, living their own stories. I don't usually do this, Claire said, pulling her phone out of her pocket. Her hands were shaking slightly. But can I get your number? I'd really like to talk to you again. I gave it to her without hesitation, without playing it cool or waiting the appropriate amount of time. She typed it in, then looked up at me with those eyes that I was already starting to memorize, already starting to see when I closed my own. I had a really good time, she said. Me too, I said. Best cancelled meeting I've ever had. She smiled one more time, then turned and walked down the street, her hands in her pockets, her head tilted up like she was looking at something in the sky only she could see. Maybe she was painting it in her mind. Maybe she was thinking about colors I didn't have names for. I stood there for a long time after she left, just watching her go, watching until she turned the corner and disappeared. I felt something I couldn't name yet. Something bigger than attraction. Bigger than interest. Something that felt like the beginning of everything. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she talked with her hands, painting invisible pictures in the air. The way she laughed like she meant it, like joy was something she chose deliberately. The way she looked at me like I was someone worth knowing, worth spending 4 hours talking to in a bookstore that smelled like old paper and rain. My phone buzzed around 11. I was lying in bed, still thinking about her, when I saw the notification. A text from an unknown number. I'm painting something. It made me think of you. I smiled so hard my face hurt. I saved her number immediately. Stared at her name on my screen. Claire. I didn't know then that when she looked at sunsets, she thought of someone else. I didn't know I was being measured against a ghost I'd never meet, a memory I could never compete with, a love story that had already been written and I wasn't in it. I didn't know that every time she said she loved me, part of her was saying it to him. I just knew that when I saw her again, I wanted to be the reason she smiled like that. I wanted to be her forever. I had no idea I was auditioning for a role already cast. I had no idea I was the backup plan, the safe choice, the intermission between acts of her real love story. But in that moment, lying in my bed, staring at her text, I was just happy. Genuinely, completely happy. And sometimes I wish I could go back to that moment. Before I knew. When I still thought I was enough. 3 months in, I was in love. Not the kind of love you ease into slowly, testing the waters, keeping one foot on solid ground just in case. The kind that hits you all at once, like falling off a cliff you didn't see coming, like stepping into an ocean and realizing there's no bottom, just depth that goes on forever. 6 months in, I was planning a future. Imagining what our life would look like in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. Where we'd live. What our mornings would sound like. Whether she'd want kids. Whether she'd let me build her a studio with floor-to-ceiling windows so the light would always find her, so she could paint from sunrise to sunset if she wanted. I'd never been the kind of person who planned that far ahead. But with Claire, I couldn't help it. She made me want forever. Claire had this way of making ordinary moments feel like poetry, like every second we spent together was a line in a story someone would want to read someday. We'd sit on her apartment floor, surrounded by canvases stacked against walls and paint tubes with dried caps scattered everywhere like confetti, and she'd tell me stories about the people she imagined lived in the buildings I designed. This one, she'd say, pointing at my sketch of a high-rise I'd been working on for months. She's a writer. She lives on the 14th floor. She drinks tea at 3 in the morning and talks to the moon. She writes letters to people she'll never send them to because she's afraid of being known. How do you know all that? I'd ask, smiling, amazed by the way her mind worked. Because I can feel her, she'd say, tracing the lines of my drawing with her finger. Buildings have souls. You put them there. You just don't realize it. I loved the way her mind worked, the way she saw stories in everything. I loved the way she'd fall asleep with her head on my chest, her fingers tracing absent patterns on my skin like she was painting something only she could see, like my body was her canvas. I loved the way she'd wake up in the middle of the night, disoriented, and whisper, "Are you awake?" And I'd say yes even if I wasn't, just to hear what she wanted to say, what dream she'd had, what painting she was planning in her mind. I loved the way she made breakfast, dancing around the kitchen in my t-shirt and her bare feet, singing off-key to songs on the radio. I loved the way she looked at me sometimes, like I was something precious, something worth keeping. But there were moments. Small moments I told myself didn't matter, moments I filed away in the back of my mind because acknowledging them felt like inviting doubt into something beautiful. Like when she'd stare out the window too long, her eyes somewhere far away, somewhere I couldn't reach no matter how many times I asked where she'd gone. "What are you thinking about?" I'd ask, coming up behind her, wrapping my arms around her waist. "Nothing," she'd say, but her voice would be distant. Hollow. Like she was speaking to me from the other side of glass. "Doesn't look like nothing. Just thinking about a painting." But it didn't look like she was thinking about a painting. It looked like she was remembering something. Or someone. Or when she'd get a text and her whole body would go still, like she was holding her breath, like the message on her screen required every ounce of her attention. She'd look at it, and something would flicker across her face. Something I couldn't name. Relief, maybe. Or longing. Or guilt. "Who is it?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual, trying not to sound like the insecure boyfriend even though that's exactly what I was becoming. "No one," she'd say, turning the phone face down, giving me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just an old friend." "What friend?" "No one you know. Someone from college. We're just catching up." I believed her because I wanted to. Because the alternative was too painful to consider. Because when she looked at me, really looked at me, when she put her phone away and came over and kissed me like she meant it, I felt like I mattered. Like I was enough. Like I was her choice. I started staying over at her place more often than my own. My toothbrush lived in her bathroom. My clothes mixed with hers in the laundry. We fell into a rhythm that felt like home. We'd spend Saturdays at art galleries, looking at other people's work, and she'd tell me what she thought, what she'd do differently, what colors she'd use. We'd spend Sundays in bed, ordering takeout and watching movies we'd both seen a dozen times because it was comfortable, because we could talk through them and it didn't matter. I met her friends. Artists and poets and musicians who lived in tiny apartments and worked jobs they hated to fund the art they loved. They welcomed me warmly, but I always felt like an outsider. The architect. The guy with the stable job and the retirement plan. The guy who didn't understand what it meant to create something from nothing. But Claire would take my hand and squeeze it, and I'd feel okay again. I proposed on a rooftop under a sky full of stars. It was the same rooftop where we'd had our third date, where she'd pointed at the constellations and made up her own names for them because she said the real ones were boring and unimaginative. That one's the dreamer, she'd said, pointing at a cluster of stars I couldn't identify. And that one's the wanderer. And that one's the lover who stayed. I remembered that last one. The lover who stayed. I wanted to be that for her. I got down on one knee, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest and fall at her feet. "Claire," I said, and my voice cracked. I cleared my throat, tried again. "I don't have a speech prepared. I thought about writing something, but everything I came up with sounded wrong. So I'm just going to say this. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy. I want to build you a life as beautiful as the way you see the world. I want to be your home. Will you marry me?" She stared at me for a long moment. Long enough that panic started creeping in, cold and sharp. Long enough that I started wondering if I'd misread everything, if I'd moved too fast, if I'd ruined everything. And then she said yes. She said yes, and she started crying, tears streaming down her face, and I pulled her into my arms and felt like the luckiest man alive. I thought they were happy tears. Everyone cries when they get engaged, right? It's overwhelming. It's a big moment. It's the beginning of forever. Now I know better. Now I know she was crying because part of her wished I was someone else. Now I know she was crying because in that moment, on that rooftop, under those stars she'd named herself, she was choosing me over the ghost she'd been carrying in her heart for years. And it hurt her. Choosing me hurt her. But in that moment, holding her on that rooftop with the stars above us and the city lights below, I thought I'd won. I thought I was her forever. I thought I was the lover who stayed. I had no idea I was just keeping her company until he came back. I had no idea that everything I was building would crumble the moment he returned. But I didn't know that yet. So I held her, and I was happy. And for a little while longer, I got to believe the story we were telling ourselves. Our wedding was small. Intimate. Just the way she wanted it. 50 people. Maybe less. I lost count somewhere between the ceremony and the reception. Close friends and family in a garden venue with string lights woven through tree branches and wildflowers that Claire picked herself because she said roses were too predictable, too expected, too much like every other wedding. I wanted to feel like us, she'd said during the planning. Natural. Unforced. Real. So we did it her way. We always did it her way. Not because she was controlling, but because I wanted her to be happy. Because seeing her happy made me happy. Because her smile was worth more than any opinion I had about flower arrangements or seating charts. Claire wore a dress the color of champagne, simple and elegant, with lace sleeves that caught the light when she moved, making her look like something out of a dream. When she walked down the aisle, I forgot how to breathe. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Not just beautiful in the way people say at weddings because they're supposed to. Beautiful in a way that hurt. In a way that made me feel like I'd never deserve her but I'd spend the rest of my life trying. In a way that made me understand why people wrote songs and poems and painted masterpieces, because sometimes beauty is so overwhelming you have to capture it somehow or it'll consume you. Her father walked beside her, smiling with tears in his eyes, the kind of tears fathers cry when they're giving away their daughters and realizing she's not their little girl anymore. Her mother sat in the front row, dabbing at her face with a tissue, her shoulders shaking slightly. And Claire looked straight at me. At least, I thought she did. Her eyes were on me, but there was something distant in them. Something I couldn't quite reach. But I told myself it was just nerves. Everyone's nervous on their wedding day, right? We wrote our own vows. I went first, my voice shaking, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the piece of paper I'd written them on. "Claire," I said, looking into her eyes, those green eyes that had captured me from the first moment. "I promise to build you a life filled with love and safety. I promise to be your home, the place you can always come back to no matter how far you wander. I promise to love you in the big moments and the small ones. When you're painting at 3 in the morning and when you're too tired to move. When you're happy and when you're sad. I promise to be the person you can always count on, always trust, always turn to. I promise to be yours. Completely. Forever. The crowd made soft sounds. Gentle sighs. The kind of sounds people make when they hear something that touches them. My sister was crying. Claire's mother was crying harder. Then it was her turn. She looked down at her own paper, then back at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Doubt, maybe. Or regret. But it was gone so fast I convinced myself I'd imagined it. I promise, she said, her voice soft, almost too soft, like she wasn't sure if she meant it, to paint our days with color and light. To make our life feel like art. To love you the way you deserve to be loved. To try every day to be the person you see when you look at me. The way I deserve to be loved. Not the way she loved me. I didn't catch that then. I was too busy being overwhelmed, too busy feeling like the luckiest man in the world. Everyone cried. Her mother. My sister. Even my best man, Marcus, who never cried at anything, who'd been through 3 of his own breakups without shedding a tear. But there was one person who wasn't there. I didn't notice at the time. I was too busy being happy. Too busy thinking this was the beginning of forever. Too busy imagining the life we'd build together, the home we'd create, the children we might have someday. But later, when I looked at the wedding photos, I saw it. The photographer had captured everything. Every moment. Every smile. Every tear. And in photo after photo, I saw the truth I'd been too blind to see in real life. The way Claire's eyes drifted to the door during the ceremony, like she was waiting for someone to walk through it. The way her smile faltered just for a second before she said I do, like she was swallowing something bitter. The way she held her phone all through the reception, checking it every few minutes, her face tight with something I couldn't name. Disappointment, maybe. Or hope? Our first dance was to a song she chose. I'd asked her to pick it because I wanted her to feel like this day was hers, like every decision mattered to her. It reminds me of us, she said when she played it for me during the planning. I didn't ask questions. I just listened. It was slow, romantic, the kind of song that makes you hold someone closer, that makes the rest of the world fade away until it's just 2 people swaying together under lights. We danced, and she rested her head on my shoulder, and I thought this is it. This is everything. This is what happiness feels like. I didn't know it was their song. I didn't know she had danced to it with him first, years ago, in a college dorm room that still lived in her memory like a shrine, like a place she returned to every time she closed her eyes. I didn't know that every time the chorus played, she was remembering him. His hands on her waist. His voice in her ear. His promises that he never kept. The reception ended late. We said goodbye to everyone, hugged our families, promised to send photos, promised to visit soon. My mother held me tight and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. She's lucky to have you." I wish she'd been right. We got in the car, drove to the hotel where we'd spend the night before leaving for our honeymoon the next morning. Italy. 2 weeks. Museums and restaurants and walks through ancient streets. She'd been so excited when we booked it. "I've always wanted to see the art in Florence," she'd said. "The David. The Uffizi. Everything." She smiled in the car. She laughed when I made a joke about finally being able to call her my wife. She kissed me in the elevator, pressed against me like she couldn't wait. And when we made love that night, she held me close and whispered my name. But every time she closed her eyes, I wonder now who she saw. I wonder if she imagined it was his hands on her skin. His voice saying her name. His body moving with hers. I thought our wedding was perfect. Everyone said it was beautiful. Intimate. Real. But perfection is a lie we tell ourselves when we don't want to see the cracks. And the cracks were already there. I just wasn't looking. I was too busy being in love to notice I was the only one. Year 2 of marriage. We bought a house. It was everything we dreamed of. Everything we'd talked about on those late nights when we'd plan our future like it was a story we were writing together, like we were architects of our own happiness. Big windows that let the light flood in from every angle. Hardwood floors that creaked in just the right way. A backyard with enough space for a garden, maybe a dog someday, maybe kids running through sprinklers on summer afternoons. A studio for her paintings, with north-facing light and enough room for all her canvases, her easels, her organized chaos of paint tubes and brushes and half-finished ideas. An office for my blueprints, my models, my late-night projects that I'd bring home because I loved my work almost as much as I loved her. I thought we were building something permanent. Something that would last through everything. Through fights and makeups. Through bad days and good ones. Through all the ordinary moments that make up a life. I spent weekends painting walls the colors she picked. Installing shelves for her books. Fixing the loose floorboard in the hallway that creaked every time you stepped on it. Claire filled the house with her art. Her paintings on the walls. Abstract pieces that looked different depending on the light, depending on your mood. Landscapes of places I didn't recognize. Portraits of people with blurred faces. Her plants in every corner. Succulents and ferns and flowers I couldn't name. She'd talk to them sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. Her books stacked on the coffee table, on the kitchen counter, on her nightstand. Art books and poetry and novels with worn covers. It felt like home. For a while. But then things started changing. Small things at first. Things I could ignore if I tried hard enough. Claire started staying up later. I'd wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and find the bed empty beside me, the sheets cold like she'd been gone for hours. I'd get up, walk through the dark house, and find her in the studio, painting things she wouldn't show me. "What are you working on?" I'd ask, standing in the doorway, watching her move in the dim light. "It's not ready yet," she'd say, not looking at me. Her brush moving across the canvas in quick, desperate strokes. "Can I see?" "Not yet." "When?" "When it's finished." But it was never finished. She'd paint over things. Start new canvases. Destroy pieces she'd spent days on. I gave her space. I trusted her. Artists have their process, right? They need privacy. They need to create without someone watching over their shoulder. That was my mistake. Trusting her. Giving her space. She started going out more. Meeting old friends, she'd say, putting on lipstick, checking her reflection one more time. Just catching up. "Anyone I know?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual. "No. Just people from art school. You wouldn't know them." I'd offer to come along. To meet them. To be part of that world she kept separate from me, that world she disappeared into more and more often. "You'd be bored," she'd say, kissing my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark I'd wipe away later. "It's just art talk. Gallery stuff. Technique. You wouldn't enjoy it." So I let it go. I let a lot of things go because I didn't want to be that husband. The suspicious one. The controlling one. The one who couldn't let his wife have her own life. But then I started noticing things. Things I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. The way she'd change her outfit 3 times before these meetups, standing in front of the mirror longer than usual, adjusting her hair, trying on different earrings, applying perfume she never wore around the house. The way she'd come home late, sometimes past midnight, with excuses about losing track of time, about the gallery staying open late, about grabbing dinner after. The way she'd smell different when she came home. Like cologne I didn't wear. A scent that clung to her jacket, her hair, her skin, masculine and expensive. The way she'd smile at her phone and then quickly hide the screen when I walked into the room, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Perfect," she'd lie, her smile tight, not reaching her eyes. "Who were you texting?" "Just a friend." Always just a friend. One night, I woke up at 3 in the morning and she wasn't in bed. The sheets beside me were cold. She'd been gone for a while. I got up, my heart already starting to race, something in my gut telling me something was wrong. I walked through the dark house, checking the bathroom, the kitchen, until I saw the light coming from under the studio door. I opened it quietly. She was standing in front of a painting, just staring at it, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something in. The painting was of a man's silhouette. Blurred. Faceless. But painted with so much longing it hurt to look at. The colors were dark. Deep blues and grays. Shadows and light playing across the canvas like a memory that wouldn't fade. It looked like heartbreak. It looked like love. "Who is that?" I asked. She jumped, spun around, her hand flying to her chest. "You scared me," she said, catching her breath. "Who is that?" I asked again, nodding at the painting, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "No one. Just a concept. An idea I'm exploring." "Claire." "It's no one," she said, her voice sharp now. Defensive. Angry that I was asking. But the way she said it told me everything. The way she positioned herself between me and the painting, like she was protecting it. The way she wouldn't meet my eyes. The way her voice cracked on the word no one. It was someone. Someone important. Someone she couldn't stop thinking about. Someone she was painting at 3 in the morning while her husband slept alone. I looked at her, standing there in the dim light of the studio wearing my old t-shirt, and I didn't recognize her. She wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe she was. Maybe I just never really knew her. Maybe I'd fallen in love with a version of her she showed me, while the real her, the complete her, was in love with someone else. Come back to bed, I said quietly. In a minute. Claire. Come back to bed. She looked at the painting one more time, something unreadable crossing her face. Then she followed me back to the bedroom. We lay there in the dark, not touching, the space between us feeling wider than it had ever been. And I knew something had changed. Something had broken. I just didn't know how bad yet. His name was Ethan. 3 syllables that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. 3 syllables that had been living in the shadows of our home, whispered in secret moments I was never meant to witness. I found out by accident. The cruelest truths always are. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary. Forgettable. The kind of day that should have dissolved into the background of our lives without leaving a mark. Claire had left for the gallery early, kissing my cheek in that absent way she had developed over the months. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, the screen still glowing with the warmth of her presence. I only meant to close it. To save the battery. To be helpful. But then I saw the name at the top of her inbox. Ethan Crawford. And beside it, a number that made my chest tighten. 67 unread messages. My hand hovered over the touchpad. Every instinct screamed at me to close it, to walk away, to preserve whatever illusion of trust we had left. But my fingers moved anyway, clicking, scrolling, opening a door I would never be able to close again. The first email was dated 3 days ago. I miss you. Simple. Devastating. I scrolled further. The messages multiplied, stretching back like a timeline of betrayal. I think about you every day. 2 weeks ago. I wish things were different. A month before that. My hands began to shake as I scrolled faster, watching the dates blur past. The emails went back years. Before we met. During those early days when she would smile at me across coffee shop tables and I thought I was the only one who made her eyes light up that way. Through our engagement, when I was picking out rings and planning a future while she was typing "I'll always care about you" to someone else. And then I found it. The one sent on our wedding day. I hope you're happy. I'll always be here. The timestamp read 10:42 in the morning. 2 hours before she walked down the aisle toward me. 2 hours before she promised forever. I felt sick. The kind of nausea that starts in your soul and radiates outward until your entire body rejects the reality it's being forced to accept. I sat there for an hour, reading. Every message was a small knife, precise and purposeful. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Memories I hadn't made. A intimacy that had nothing to do with physical touch but somehow felt more unfaithful than any affair. When Claire came home that evening, I was still sitting at the kitchen counter. The laptop screen had gone dark, but I hadn't moved. She knew immediately. I saw it in the way her face drained of color, the way her keys clattered too loudly against the bowl by the door. You read them. Not a question. All of them. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears were already forming. It's not what it looks like. I laughed. It came out hollow, echoing in the space between us. Then what is it, Claire? Explain to me what it looks like. She moved closer, and I noticed she was wearing the perfume I'd bought her for Christmas. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was my first love. We grew up together on the same street. We used to ride bikes to the lake every summer and talk about running away together. He moved away when we were 18 and we lost touch, but we reconnected a few years ago and it's just friendship. I swear to you, it's just friendship. You email him every week. Because he's my friend. Does he know you're married? The question hung in the air. I watched her face carefully, cataloging every micro-expression, every tell. She hesitated, and in that single heartbeat of silence, I heard everything she wasn't saying. He knows, she finally said, but her voice wavered. Does he know you told him you miss him? On our wedding day? Does he know that while I was standing at the altar waiting for you, you were telling another man you'll always be there for him? She looked away, focusing on a point just past my shoulder. Anywhere but my eyes. That was a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything. Then cut him off. What? She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. If it doesn't mean anything, cut him off. Block him. Delete his number. Remove him from your life. She stared at me, and I watched something shift in her expression. Fear. Panic. The look of someone being asked to amputate a part of themselves they didn't realize they still needed. I can't do that. Why not? Because he's important to me. The words settled between us like stones. Heavy. Immovable. More important than me, she didn't say. But I heard it anyway. I heard it in every breath she took, in the way she wrapped her arms around herself protectively, as if I was the threat and not the man whose name lived in her inbox like a kept secret. Outside, it started to rain. Soft at first, then building into something insistent, drumming against the windows like it was trying to wash something away. But some stains run too deep. Some betrayal seep into the foundation. I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. I need some air. Where are you going? Does it matter? I left her standing in our kitchen, surrounded by the life we'd built together. A life that suddenly felt like a set piece, beautiful but hollow, constructed around a truth I'd been too blind to see. His name was Ethan. And he'd been there all along. 3 months passed like a slow-burning fever. We didn't talk about Ethan again, but his presence filled our home like smoke, invisible but suffocating. Then Claire told me the news. She said it while folding laundry, her hands smoothing wrinkles from a shirt with mechanical precision, her voice light and casual, as if she was mentioning a change in the weather. Oh, by the way, Ethan's back. He got a job here. At the university. Teaching art history. My hands froze on the book I was pretending to read. The words on the page dissolved into meaningless shapes. Are you going to see him? She didn't even pause in her folding. Maybe. I don't know. Probably. It would be weird not to, right? After all these years. Claire. What? She finally looked at me, and there was something defiant in her eyes. Something that told me she'd already made her decision and was just waiting for me to give her a reason to justify it. I'm not comfortable with this. Then get comfortable, she snapped, her hands stilling on the fabric. I'm not ending a friendship because you're insecure. Insecure. The word landed like a slap. It twisted everything, made me the problem, made my pain something small and unreasonable. That word gutted me more than the emails had. She started seeing him once a week. Coffee on Tuesday mornings. Lunch on Thursdays. Gallery visits on Saturday afternoons. It's harmless, she'd say every time, kissing my cheek with the same mechanical affection she'd give a brother. But I noticed things. Small things that added up to a truth I didn't want to face. She started dressing nicer on those days. Not for me. For him. The jeans that made her legs look longer. The blue sweater that brought out her eyes. The boots with the slight heel that made her stand taller. She started wearing perfume again. The expensive one she saved for special occasions. Our anniversaries. Important dinners. Now she wore it to meet him for coffee. And she started coming home different. There was a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. A brightness that used to be for me, once upon a time, back when I could still make her laugh without trying. I tried to compete with a ghost and lost before the fight even began. How do you fight someone who exists in her memory as perfect? Untouched by reality, by bills and bad mornings and annoying habits? Ethan didn't leave dishes in the sink. Ethan didn't forget to take out the trash. Ethan didn't work late or come home exhausted or have bad breath in the morning. Ethan was a fantasy preserved in amber, forever young and perfect and possible. I couldn't compete with possibility. I could only offer reality, and reality had become something she wanted to escape. One night in November, she came home late. The clock on the mantel read 11:37 when I heard her keys in the door. She'd said she'd be home by 9. I was sitting in the dark living room, waiting. Not because I wanted to ambush her, but because I couldn't sleep. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but wait and wonder. She jumped when she saw me. God, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark? Where were you? I told you. Out with Sarah and the girls. But her eyes didn't meet mine when she said it. I stood up, moving closer, and that's when I saw it. Her lipstick was smudged, bleeding slightly beyond the line of her lips. Her hair was messier than it had been when she left. What happened to your lipstick? Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh. I tripped getting out of Sarah's car. Hit my face on the doorframe. Stupid, right? You tripped. Yeah. She laughed, but it sounded wrong. Too high. Too quick. I'm so clumsy. I didn't believe her. Every instinct I had screamed that she was lying. But I didn't have proof. No incriminating texts. No eyewitness accounts. Just a feeling, deep and certain and devastating. Good night, Claire. I walked past her toward the bedroom, and I felt her relief like a physical thing, warm and palpable in the space between us. That night, I lay awake beside my wife and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. She fell asleep quickly, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of peace, while I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when I'd stopped being enough. The weeks that followed were a slow erosion. I watched as my wife slowly fell back in love with someone else. Right in front of me. In the way she smiled at her phone. In the way she hummed while getting ready to see him. In the way she stopped asking about my day but would spend an hour telling me about something funny Ethan had said. I became a spectator in my own marriage. Watching. Waiting. Hoping for something to change while knowing, deep down, that the ending had already been written. I just hadn't read the last page yet. It happened at an art gallery on a Friday night in spring. The West Side Contemporary, all white walls and strategic lighting, filled with people who wore black and spoke in hushed, reverent tones about composition and negative space. Claire's exhibition. Months of work. Dozens of paintings. Her first solo show. I was so proud of her. Despite everything, despite the distance growing between us like a chasm, I was proud. I'd watched her create each piece, seen her stay up late with paint under her fingernails and that faraway look in her eyes that meant she was lost in her art. I invited everyone. My family drove in from 3 states away. Our friends cleared their schedules. I wore the suit she loved, the charcoal one with the blue tie that matched her eyes, and I stood beside her as people filtered in, champagne glasses in hand, admiring her work. For a moment, it felt like old times. She smiled at me, squeezed my hand, whispered thank you in a way that sounded genuine. And then he walked in. Ethan. Tall. Handsome in that effortless way some men are, wearing a leather jacket and confidence like they were the same thing. He moved through the crowd like he owned the room, and maybe he did, because every eye turned to watch him. But none more than Claire's. Her face transformed. That's the only word for it. Transformed. The polite smile she'd been wearing for guests melted into something real, something luminous and alive and devastating to witness. She ran to him. Actually ran, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and she threw her arms around him in a hug that lasted 3 heartbeats too long. 4. 5. I felt every eye in the room shift to me. The husband. The fool. Standing alone with my champagne glass, watching my wife embrace another man with more warmth than she'd shown me in months. My mother touched my arm. Honey? I couldn't look at her. Couldn't bear to see the pity I knew would be in her eyes. They spent the whole evening together. Claire and Ethan, moving through the gallery like they were the only 2 people there. She introduced him to everyone, her hand on his arm, her voice bright with an enthusiasm I'd forgotten she possessed. This is Ethan. My oldest friend. We grew up together. Not this is my husband. Not have you met my husband. I was already introduced, already established, already irrelevant. I became an afterthought. Furniture. Something to move around. At one point, I overheard them talking near the back of the gallery. I'd gone to refill my drink, something to do with my hands, and their voices carried across the space. This one's my favorite, Claire said, and I turned to see them standing in front of a large canvas. The silhouette painting. The one I'd asked about months ago, the one she'd said was no one in particular. It's you, she told him. Not quietly. Not privately. Right there, in the middle of her exhibition, surrounded by everyone we knew. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd won something he'd been chasing for years. I'm honored. You inspired it. You inspire a lot of my work, actually. You always have. My glass nearly slipped from my hand. The champagne suddenly tasted like acid. You inspired it. Words she'd never said to me. Words I'd waited years to hear. I set my glass down on the nearest table and walked out. Through the gallery. Past the clusters of people. Past my mother calling my name. Past my friends looking confused. out into the cool spring air that did nothing to ease the burning in my chest. No one followed me. No one noticed. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past like tears I refused to shed. 3 hours later, she came home and found me in our bedroom, packing a bag. Clothes. Toiletries. The things you need when you're not coming back. What are you doing? I didn't look up. Kept folding, kept packing. What does it look like? You're leaving? Because of tonight? You told him he inspires you. I finally met her eyes. You've never said that about me. Not once. Not ever. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. Another word to make me small. Another word to make my pain unreasonable. I laughed, and it came out cold and hollow, echoing in our bedroom like a ghost of the man I used to be. I'm done, Claire. Done? With being second place. With watching you light up for someone else. With being the backup plan while you chase your real love story. He's my friend. He's the man you paint. He's the man you run to. He's the man you save your best smiles for. I zipped the bag. And I'm just the man you married. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, and I couldn't read her expression anymore. Couldn't tell if she was sad or relieved or something in between. Where will you go? Does it matter? I picked up my bag and walked past her, and she didn't try to stop me. Didn't reach for my hand. Didn't say wait or please or I love you. She just let me go. And somehow, that hurt most of all. I stayed at a hotel for a week. The Marriott downtown, neutral and anonymous, with beige walls and a view of other people's lives through the window. Room 417 became my temporary sanctuary, my exile, my limbo. She didn't call. I checked my phone obsessively, watching the screen light up with work emails and spam, but never her name. She didn't text. Not even to ask if I was okay. Not even to fight. The silence was its own answer. But she posted photos on social media. I couldn't stop myself from looking, from torturing myself with the evidence of her happiness. Her and Ethan at a cafe, laughing over lattes. Her and Ethan at the park, autumn leaves scattered around them like confetti. Her smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. Like I didn't exist. Like I'd already been erased from her story, edited out, a deleted scene that didn't make the final cut. When I finally went back to the house, it was on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd called first, to make sure she'd be at the gallery. I just needed to get more of my things. My books. My winter clothes. Evidence that I'd once lived there. But she was home. I heard her voice before I even opened the door, laughing at something, that bright, musical laugh I used to think was just for me. I used my key, turning it slowly, stepping into my own house like an intruder. And I found them. In our living room. On our couch. The leather one we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store, the one she'd convinced me we needed even though it cost too much. Claire and Ethan. Sitting close, too close, drinking from our mugs. The handmade ceramic ones from that pottery class we'd taken on our second anniversary. His hand was on her knee, casual and familiar, like it belonged there. They looked up when I entered, and I watched the guilt flicker across Claire's face before she buried it under something harder. Defiance. What is this? My voice came out steadier than I felt. She stood up, and Ethan did too, but slower, more relaxed. Like he had all the time in the world. Like he'd already won. We need to talk. About? I knew. I already knew. But I needed to hear her say it. She looked at Ethan, and he gave her the smallest nod. Permission. Encouragement. That small gesture told me everything about the power dynamic I'd been blind to. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a freight train. Even though I'd expected them, even though I'd known they were coming, hearing them aloud was different. Final. Real. You want a divorce? Yes. Because of him. Because I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time. I've been pretending, and I'm tired of pretending. And you think you'll be happy with him? She looked at Ethan again, and the smile that crossed her face was gentle, certain, cruel in its honesty. Yes. I made myself look at him. Really look at him. At the man who'd haunted my marriage like a specter. He had kind eyes, I noticed. An easy smile. The kind of face you'd trust. The kind of man you'd never suspect of slowly dismantling someone else's life. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look sorry. He looked victorious, like an athlete who'd just crossed the finish line. How long? I asked, my voice dropping to something dangerous. How long what? How long have you two been sleeping together? That's not relevant to anything right now and you know it, Claire started, but I cut her off. How long? Silence. Heavy and damning. Then Ethan spoke, his voice casual, almost friendly. For months. For months. 16 weeks. 120 days. While I was trying to save my marriage. While I was buying flowers and making dinner and trying to remember how to make her smile. While I was begging her to remember us, to fight for us. She was already gone. Already his. So I was what? I looked at Claire, searched her face for some trace of the woman I'd married. A safety net? A backup plan? Someone to keep around just in case he didn't work out. Claire finally looked ashamed. It flickered across her face like a candle flame, brief and insufficient. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it did. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed, and it tasted bitter. You just meant to cheat on me. To lie to me. To bring him into our home while I was at work. But you didn't mean to hurt me. I fell in love, she said, and her voice broke. I didn't plan it. I didn't want it. But I fell in love, and I can't unfeel it. You fell in love while you were married to me. Yes. The admission hung in the air. Honest. Devastating. Irreversible. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders, protective, possessive. Claiming what had apparently been his all along. I left that night. Walked out of the house I'd thought was mine, out of the life I'd built, out of the story I'd thought we were writing together. I signed the papers a month later. Met with lawyers and divided our life into neat, legal columns. She got the house. I got my freedom, though it felt less like liberation and more like amputation. She married him 6 months after that. A small ceremony, from what I heard. Intimate. Just close friends and family. The wedding she'd actually wanted, I suppose. With the groom she'd actually chosen. I didn't go. Obviously. But I saw the photos. Facebook algorithms are cruel that way, showing you exactly what you don't want to see. She wore cream instead of white. Held wildflowers instead of roses. Smiled like she'd finally found her way home. And maybe she had. Maybe Ethan was her home. Maybe I'd only ever been a rest stop on the way to her real destination. The thought didn't comfort me. But eventually, it stopped cutting quite so deep. 2 years later, I'm different. Not healed, not entirely, but different. Stronger. Rebuilt from the ruins of what I used to be. I moved cities. Left behind the streets we'd walked together, the restaurants we'd loved, the park where I'd proposed. I packed everything into a rental truck and drove 9 hours north to Seattle, where the rain matched my mood and nobody knew my story. I started over. It's a cliché, but clichés exist because they're true. I focused on my work, threw myself into designing buildings that would outlast any heartbreak. Architecture became my therapy, my meditation, my proof that I could still create something permanent. I worked late. Took on projects other architects turned down. Designed a library that won the Regional Excellence Award. Then a community center that got featured in Architectural Digest. Then a museum that caught the attention of firms I'd only dreamed of working for. I won awards. Got promoted. Senior architect by year 1. Junior partner by year 2. Built a name for myself that had nothing to do with being someone's ex-husband. I stopped checking her social media. Deleted Facebook. Unfollowed her on Instagram. Removed the temptation to torture myself with evidence of her happiness. I stopped wondering if she was happy. Stopped caring if Ethan was everything she'd hoped he'd be. Stopped imagining their life together in the house that used to be mine. I dated. Nothing serious. A few dinners. A few brief relationships that faded naturally when we realized we were looking for different things. I didn't tell them about Claire. Didn't explain why I flinched when someone said forever. I was learning to be whole on my own first. And then one day, on a Wednesday morning that felt like any other, I got an email. The sender's name made my coffee taste wrong in my mouth. From Claire. My finger hovered over the delete button. I'd made a rule. No looking back. No reopening closed doors. No giving her real estate in my head anymore. But curiosity is a vicious thing. I opened it. I made a mistake. 4 words. 20 characters. A grenade disguised as an apology. I stared at those words for a long time, watching the cursor blink on the screen, counting my heartbeats to make sure they stayed steady. She went on. Paragraph after paragraph of justification and regret. She told me Ethan wasn't who she thought he was. That the fantasy didn't match reality, that when you actually live with someone, when you see them at their worst, when the honeymoon phase evaporates like morning mist, you're left with just a person. Flawed. Human. Disappointing. She told me he was controlling. That he criticized her art. That he didn't like her spending time with friends without him. That he tracked her phone and asked where she'd been and made her feel small in ways I never had. The irony wasn't lost on me. She told me she missed me. Missed my steadiness. My support. The way I'd always believed in her. The way I'd loved her without conditions or caveats. I'm sorry, she wrote. I threw away something real for something that looked shinier from a distance. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Can we talk? Can I see you? Can we try again? I read it twice. The first time with my heart racing, old feelings surging up like muscle memory. The second time with clarity, with the distance 2 years and 900 miles had given me. Then I hit delete. No response. No closure. No explanation. I didn't owe her anything. Not my forgiveness. Not my time. Not another chance to make me second choice. Because I finally understood something that had taken 2 years and a city's worth of distance to learn. She didn't miss me. Not really. She missed the version of me that worshipped her. The version that would drop everything to make her happy. The version that made her feel adored without demanding the same in return. The version that was grateful just to be chosen. She missed the backup plan. The safety net. The man who would always be there, waiting, just in case. But that version of me was gone. Buried somewhere in a hotel room in my old city, left behind with the wedding photos and the shared furniture and the man I used to be. I wasn't his rival. I'd never been competing with Ethan. I'd never even been in the race. I was just the intermission between acts of her real love story. The palate cleanser. The placeholder until she could have what she really wanted. And now? Now I'm writing my own story. One where I'm the main character, not the supporting role in someone else's romance. One where my happiness doesn't depend on someone who never fully chose me. I'm building buildings that will stand for generations. I'm making friends who value me. I'm learning to be enough for myself. And someday, maybe, I'll meet someone who doesn't need to lose me to realize my worth. Someone who chooses me first, completely, without hesitation or comparison. But until then, I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm free. Outside my office window, Seattle's skyline stretches toward a sky heavy with clouds that will eventually break. The Space Needle stands permanent against the gray, and I think about endurance. About foundations. About building something that lasts. My phone buzzes with a new project proposal. A high-rise downtown. Challenging. Ambitious. Exactly what I need. I close my laptop, Claire's email already forgotten, already irrelevant, and get back to work. The best revenge isn't anger or bitterness or proving something to someone who stopped watching. The best revenge is becoming someone you're proud of. Someone who doesn't need revenge at all. And I'm getting there. One building. One day. One choice at a time.